Hey you guys, it's Rebekah here. Today I want to talk to you about the royal family and whether or not the claims to racism are true. Do they ring true? Is there a history of racism within the royal family? I'll put some makeup on while I do it. Yay. You'll be interested in this video. I'm sure you all saw the interview with Meghan, Harry, and Oprah. I was shocked, so that made me want to do some research on what the crap is going on in the royal family. Are these claims true? If you are watching this video, then you probably saw the interview that I'm talking about and have a little bit of background yourself about the claims, some of the claims that were made. So as always, I want to thank you for tuning in, and let's dive into what happened during the interview, and then we're going to go a little further in history and see what, if anything, can be told. The interview that I'm talking about, it aired in the US and in the UK on March the 8th. Now that's important because the same day Queen Elizabeth II was celebrating, quote, friendship, spirit of unity, and achievements of the Commonwealth. For me, it felt more like a tell-all because these were not things that I knew before this interview, and I wouldn't, if Meghan hadn't have spoke up, told all us common folk what the crap was going on behind closed doors and in their personal lives. I don't think anybody would have ever known. Once I did the research, I dug up a lot. Sure, it seems like there's evidence online of where they try to portray themselves as a family as not being racist in any form or fashion, but yeah, I think that is not true. I think that's just, you know, they have the money and the ability to portray themselves in such a way that paints them in a better light. Let's talk real quick about some of the claims that Meghan and Harry made during this. Ooh, I'm gonna be putting my makeup on at the same time. I don't know if I mentioned that. We're gonna talk about some of the claims that Meghan and Harry made during this Oprah interview and any facts that there are to back that up, any facts that, you know, either Meghan or Harry gave or that could be found, you know, online. One of the claims was that racist headlines really fueled racist comments. So what I'm saying is the tabloids and press in the surrounding Meghan, and especially in near the royal family, were reported in such a way that the manner was so obviously racially biased that there was no denying it. One of the first things that we can check chronologically is November 8th, 2016. And that was a week that for Prince Harry himself, a real line was crossed. So Jason Knauf, and I'm probably saying that last name wrong because I butcher all names, but Knauf, he was, and he may still be, I don't know, Prince Harry's communications secretary. And he released a statement saying Prince Harry has never really been comfortable with sharing his personal life, and he doesn't understand why there's so many people that are curious about his private life. And then he added, and this is a quote, and I'm going to read it directly. Quote, he has rarely taken formal action on the very regular publication of fictional stories that are written about him, and he has worked hard to develop a professional relationship with the media, focused on his work and the issues he cares about. But the past week has seen a line crossed. His girlfriend, Meghan Markle, has been subject to a wave of abuse and harassment. Some of this has been very public the smear on the front page of a national newspaper, the racial undertones of comment pieces, and the outright sexism and racism of social media trolls and website article comments, end quote. So what he's saying is that around this time, I guess Harry took note and was seeing that Meghan really wasn't being treated equally, and he wanted to put a stop to it, I think, more or less is what we get here. The press ended up later reporting that they reported further that staff leaving Kensington Palace as speculation began to grow in the media that all was not well between Meghan, Harry, and their staff. Is it possible that Meghan could have been difficult? During this Oprah interview, Meghan was asked if she feared, or expected rather, backlash from the palace. And she was quoted as saying, I'm not gonna live my life in fear. I don't know how they could expect that after all this time we would just be still and be silent. If there is an active role that the firm, the royal family, is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us. And then, of course, Harry speaks on it and says, in regard to past articles that have been written about Meghan, he said, quote, "The saddest part, I guess, was 70 members of parliament, female members of parliament, came out and called out the colonial undertones of articles and headlines written about Meghan, yet no one from my family ever said anything over those 3 years. That hurts, and I am also acutely aware of where my family stands and how scared they are of the tabloids turning on them." So he does acknowledge the fact that that the royal family tries to keep some sort of peace with the tabloids. Now that was on November 8th, 2016. Now there is a headline called, quote, "Duchess Difficult," and that was the headline for a Sunday Times story detailing how she was going to lose these two close aides, Private Secretary Samantha Cohen and PA Melissa Tubati. I don't know how to say it, Touabti. In this article, they've named her Duchess Difficult, and obviously that brings some not so good light onto Meghan. I'm sure that nobody wants to be painted in a bad or poor light, and when you're famous or have the money to do so, I'm sure you can make things disappear, and I'm sure that you can pay the right people to not so objectively report things and to report things in a way that would be better for you or your family. That being said, this happens all the time. It's not just the royals that do that. The next brought up from this Meghan and Harry Oprah interview is the allegations of concerns over Archie's skin tone. For me, this is major. I don't know. Who gives a flying crap what skin tone this child is going to have? I just can't even believe that it was brought up. Obviously it was. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that Meghan or Harry, either one, are lying to us. When Harry was asked about this issue, he said, quote, "That conversation I'm never going to share, but at the time it was awkward. I was a bit shocked. That was right at the beginning when she wasn't going to get security," talking about Meghan, "when members of my family were suggesting that she carries on acting because there's not enough money to pay for her and all this sort of stuff. There were some real obvious signs before we even got married that this was going to be really hard." We don't know who said this. We have no clue who brought up the concern of this sweet little innocent baby's skin color or skin tone. Socialite Lady Colin Campbell, of no relation to me, she went on her podcast, and her podcast is named Chatting with Lady C. She believes that the couple was pointing a finger to Queen's daughter, Princess Anne, but she says that it was simply a misunderstanding in a discussion about the cultural differences between Brits and Americans, and said this is a quote from Lady Colin Campbell, Lady C. This is her quote. Quote, "There were no concerns about Meghan's color," she said. Quote, "Princess Anne was rightly concerned that if the marriage proceeded and there were children, that there would be huge problems. Not because of Meghan's color, but because of Meghan's inability and determination to remain unable to appreciate the cultural differences." So she's putting it back on Meghan. She goes on further, adding that Anne was concerned that Meghan may not, quote, "actually have respect for the institution into which she was marrying and the family in which she was marrying. Meghan and Harry have used that genuine concern of a loving aunt," again, this is from the Lady C, her own words. "Meghan and Harry have used that genuine concern of a loving aunt, knowing that because she is down to earth, experienced, modest, intelligent, and sensible, that you cannot make a sow's ear into a silk purse. Nobody is the guilty party in terms of racism, but Princess Anne was the champion in terms of don't marry that girl, she is unsuitable, she is wrong for the country, wrong for the job." Well, that's turned out to be true. I think, and this is continuing on with this quote, okay, people, not me. Anyway, well, it's turned out to be true. I think it's important that it is out there before it is weaponized by some anti-establishment, anti-monarchist organization who will spin things destructively to further their agenda. Lady Colin also added that she had, quote, "met Anne a few times, but the pair were not friends." Obviously, if they're not friends and she's only met her a few times, then how on earth would she know that possibly Princess Anne was the one to say this? Is there any validity behind what she's saying? I don't know, but the fact of the matter is, why is this Lady Colin saying that Meghan was wrong for the country and wrong for the job and unsuitable, and it's turned out to be true, and that she would be twisting a genuine concern? It sounds like this lady is completely off her rocker and racist as well. That's just my opinion though. I don't know. What do you guys think? The next thing was the lack of support from the institution over media. Meghan is quoted during this interview as saying, "It was only once we were married and everything started to really worsen that I came to understand that not only was I not being protected, but that they were willing to lie to protect other members of the family. But they weren't willing to tell the truth to protect me and my husband." This is exceptionally true, because if you go back, if you believe, which I do, what Meghan is saying about and put in the tabloids that Meghan made Kate cry, and it really ended up being the other way around, and it was over this dress, bridesmaid's dress or flower girl's dress. Why would it be reported differently? Why would it have been painting Meghan as the bad guy in this, right? And she goes on further and gives a couple more examples about, like, you know, eating avocado toast. Well, when Kate did it, it was great, but when she does it, she's such a diva. And just, I mean, everything that the tabloids put out really was just twisted, and in my opinion, twisted to try to use against her to make her look bad. Now that I know more and they have done this interview and stuff, I really don't think that Meghan was probably as bad as she was portrayed. Firm or the institution, I think that they had ill intentions toward her from the jump, and were going to try to do everything they could to make her look bad, and probably in an effort to, you know, keep maybe the marriage from happening, make sense of why they weren't getting her and her son, her and her family weren't getting the same treatment as other royals. I think they had an ulterior motive there. The next thing on the list of, I guess really this is just a list of crap that caught my eye that was said during the Oprah interview. The next thing was no traditional royal family photos. This one really bothers me too, because I just think about when Prince Harry and William were born, how they had the picture, you know, the dad outside of the hospital, and then Princess Diana and Charles out there with the baby, and just those kinds of things just seem like such special moments and almost a privilege, I guess. I don't know, but it seems super cool and like something that was tradition, probably pretty important to those in the royal family. There was no traditional family photos when Archie was born. Meghan says they weren't asked to take traditional family photos when Archie was born in March 2019. Princess Diana and Duchess Kate, they were previously posed hospital set up and swaddled, you know, with their infants. People initially believed that the couple made this decision, but it actually is not something that the couple decides. I think it was rather decided for them. Meghan's quoted as saying those weren't decisions to make, as in they didn't get to make the decision. And also, quote, even though I have a lot of clarity of what comes with the titles, good and bad, that is their birthright to then make a choice about. And I agree with her. Like, they should, any children that they have, I feel like, should be treated just the same. All the same things should happen as far as photography and making a hoopla and the whole prince thing and, you know, the titles, the security, all that. I feel like it all should be the same, consistent across all children. I would consider them heirs. Obviously, I'm not royal, and there's probably a reason. I'm not civilized enough. The next thing is the no security detail of major importance when not only are you a celebrity figure, but you're also a member of a royal family, who I am sure there is plenty of people that don't like, plenty of people do, plenty of crazed stalker fans kind of thing going on. There's a lot packed into that. And I was really shocked. It's not even an allegation. It's like, it's fact. I was really shocked at this fact. In the Oprah interview, it said, you know, Meghan says, quote, in those months when I was pregnant, we have in tandem a conversation of you won't be given security, not going to be given a title, concerned in the conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born. And she also goes on to explain that denying him the title violated the George V convention. And this was just another example of how Archie was treated as though he were really like a second class to his own family. Quote, he needs to be safe, end quote, Meghan tells Oprah. Meghan tells Oprah, and this is all quotes, we're not saying don't make him a prince or a princess, whatever it's going to be, but if you're saying that the title is going to affect their protection, we haven't created this monster machine around us in terms of clickbait and tabloid fodder. You've allowed that to happen, which means our son needs to be safe. And who would not agree with that? It's just unimaginable and unfathomable that you wouldn't want this sweet little baby protected the same way you would want any other royal family member protected. It makes no sense. It's absolutely ludicrous. During their kind of off-duty time where they're trying to decide what exactly to do, they are just abruptly stripped of security and with little notice, according to them. And that's a shocker. I can't imagine being just feeling secure and having security around you, having a security detail, and then suddenly with short notice they're gone. And it's like, how do you then protect yourself when your whole life you've grown up with this kind of detail? And Meghan married into having a security detail. The next thing was son Archie, which we've kind of talked about a little bit already, but he would not receive, he would not be a prince or receive a title. Quote, they didn't want him to be a prince or princess, not knowing what the gender would be, which would be different from protocol, and that he wasn't going to receive security, end quote. According to Meghan and Harry, the royal family brushed off many chances to correct the course that they have taken, the course of action, and they didn't acknowledge the impacts being biracial would have on Archie's safety. The Queen could have made an exception for him And this is what really ties it all together for me, because the Queen has the ability and authority to make changes. The Queen could have made an exception for him to be recognized as a prince. She did this for Prince William's second and third child. So it's hard not to see the royal family as not valuing Meghan, not valuing Archie, or really Harry's family as a whole, Prince Harry's family as a whole, because if they did, why would you not do the same thing that you had did that was extra for Prince William and his second and third child? So let's talk real quick about the Megxit, because that was a big tabloid hoopla. The Megxit led to a meeting of the royal family on January 13th, and that was dubbed the, and I'm gonna butcher this name, Sandringham Summit, Ringham Summit, and was described as unprecedented. The Megxit. On January 8th, 2020, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, announced on their Instagram their decision to, quote, step back as senior members of the royal family. And they were gonna split their time between the United States, North America and the UK. Planned to become financially independent. That was the event that was dubbed the Megxit. And it was adopted globally on mainstream and social media, spawning various memes about the Megxit and also merchandising. Queen Elizabeth II issued a rare personal statement she issued, y'all, on her family, and she was praised for the way she was handling all this. On January 18th, an agreement was announced where the couple would, quote, no longer be working members of Britain's royal family, end quote, and would also not use, Royal Highness styles. It's going to be a 12-month review period for the couple if they decided to change their mind on how they wanted to do things. On February 19th, 2021, Buckingham Palace confirmed that the Duke and Duchess would relinquish their royal patronages and they were not returning as royal family members. The Megxit signified the couple's break from the royal family and its protocol. Their plans for independence under their new brand tentatively used the name Sussex Royal. Queen Elizabeth II released saying that, quote, a period of transition in which the Sussexes will spend time in Canada and the UK. After 4 months in Canada, Harry and Meghan actually ended up moving to the United States with their son. And if you watch the interview with Meghan, Harry, and Oprah, they describe living in one of Tyler Perry's homes and him providing them with security and just kind of what happened from there. The main details of this Megxit: the couple would no longer represent the Queen. They would no longer represent or carry out duties for the Queen. They wouldn't be able to use the Royal Highness style. Instead of His Royal Highness, it would be Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. Harry and Meghan would be financially independent of the British taxpayer exchequer, and it's EXCEHQUER, and they would also be responsible for repaying £2.4 million of renovation costs at Frogmore Cottage. Renovations were done for them, and then I guess because they didn't end up staying in the royal family, it was like charged back to them or something. I don't know. Prince Harry would cease duties for all British military appointments, including Captain General Royal Marines, and he would no longer officially represent the royal family at military ceremonies. That's kind of the breakdown of the Megxit. The couple also spend most of their time in North America, and Frogmore Cottage would continue to function as their British home, but they would pay a commercial rent for it. The couple would retain their private patronages and associations with, like, Rebekah's games, but not royal ones like any Commonwealth Youth Ambassador. Prince Charles would continue to provide financial support, and obviously this is later in the Oprah interview. This is discovered to not be true. He is not financially supporting them. They are independently supporting themselves. Not included in these royal changes, I guess you would say, was the couple's security agreement. It was completely unclear. The only thing the Queen really had to say in regard to their security arrangements was, quote, "There are well-established independent processes to determine the need for publicly funded security," end quote. Obviously, they don't feel like it's necessary for their Meghan and Harry and the fam jam to have security. I think she's made that abundantly clear. Or maybe not she, but the institution or the firm. Also not clear if the Sussex Royal would be a brand that they could even use. This seemed a little calculated from my point of view. There's an Instagram account for Clarence House, and that's the residence of, that's where Prince Charles and his wifey, Duchess Camilla, live. They posted photos, or excuse me, that Instagram account, whomever runs it, posted photos of the future king visiting a pop-up vaccine location where he's seen interacting with Black people. Calculated much? Let's go into the royal family history, shall we? It might be there that we can really open up some doors and see if there has historically been anything even slightly racist going on in the backgrounds that we need to know about. A little investigation, if you will. I found an article. It was based off of another article that the Jamaican Observer had reported. Turns out the royals have used historical, this is a quote, okay? The royals have used historical trichology to cover up their racist past. For more than 150 years, the British royal family monopolized the slave trade. The fact that they were monopolizing the slave trade means that they were very, very active in the slave trade. Ran it. They ran the show. Here are some things that you need to know in regard to as it ties in to the royal family. Number one, and this is according to the Jamaican Observer. These are not things that I came up with on my own. Number one is the royals endorsed slavery. The history of the British royal family is intertwined with slavery. Quote, "The slave trading initiatives endorsed by the English monarchy began with Queen Elizabeth I's enthusiastic support of John Hawkins' slavery expeditions in the 1560s. Hawkins raided African settlements on the West African coast and sold his cargo of African captives in the Spanish Caribbean. After his profitable second voyage, he was honored by the Queen, and she bestowed upon him a coat of arms and crest featuring a nude African-bound shackled. Quote, "Pirate John Hawkins was not the first Englishman to trade slaves, but he was the first to run the triangular trade from Africa to the Americas and back to England, making a profit from every stop," the Jamaican Observer reported. Number two, profits from slavery boosted England's economy. The Queen of England, who directly sent pirate John Hawkins to get slaves, yes, she sent him to get slaves, by any means necessary, knew that her country's weak economy needed a boost. So what did she do? Sent a man off to get slaves. And the slave trade did give it that boost, unfortunately. Number three, the royal family invested in slavery. During the reign of King Charles II, from 1660 to 1685, the crown and members of the royal family invested heavily in the African slave trade. Established by the Royal Stuart family and City of London. In 1660, the Royal African Company of England shipped more enslaved African women, men, and children to the Americas than any other single institution during the entire period of the transatlantic slave trade. And that is according to historian William Pettigrew. Until 1688, the Duke of York and future King James II served as governor of the Royal African Company and its largest shareholder. So the Duke of York was the largest shareholder of the Royal African Company. What was the Royal African Company of England? They were in charge of shipping enslaved African women, men, and children to the Americas and any other single institution. They were slave traders. That's what that was. This man was the largest shareholder in the slave trade. Before it was publicly, slavery was an atrocity. Privately, it was economic fuel. What does that mean? Now, in 2018, old Prince Charles said that Britain's role in the slave world was an atrocity that has left an, quote, indelible stain on the world. The future King of England acknowledged that in a speech in Ghana, where many Africans were being seized and shipped across the Atlantic on ships from Britain and other nations, The Guardian reported. Yet, Prince Charles didn't speak of the royal family's historic ties to slavery. He thinks that Britain as a whole, their role in slave trade was atrocious. But not the family, not the fact that the family held stock in this or anything. That was not atrocious. No, sir. Brings us to number 5, the hidden shame. In British history, according to experts, of course, not according to me, but British history has been revised many times over to hide ties between the royals and, quote, some of the most shameful acts and crimes committed during the final years of the British Empire. And that is reported also by The Guardian. Documents were systematically destroyed and official review was concluded, meaning that they swept it under the rug and please don't ever talk about it again. Some papers during this era of time did survive, were hidden for another 50 years in a secret Foreign Office archive. Now in 2013, the Foreign Office, they were forced to release 8,800 files from 37 former colonies. Unfortunately, most of the more scandalous paperwork during the colonial era were destroyed. Moving on. Queen Victoria, during her reign, befriended an Indian Muslim, and his name was Abdul Karim, K-R-I-M. She befriended him in 1887. He was kind of like a tutor to her, really a very close confidant, and they had about a 24-year age difference between the two of them. But they were really close for whatever reason, and nobody in the royal family likes it at all. But he was one of 2 Indian servants sent over for the Queen's table at the Golden Jubilee. That was in 1887. Now, by 1894, Abdul was just like involved in everything that the Queen was involved in. He was at royal reception. He held the position, quote, Her Majesty's Indian Secretary of the royal family. Like I said, they really tried everything to get rid of him. They told her, that he was low class and was not deserving of this position, trying everything they could to get her to get rid of this man because he didn't serve a purpose, I guess, for them. They didn't see his value. They didn't like it, okay? They didn't like it. They tried to force her hand, but she wasn't having it. She liked him, and she wanted to knight him. She actually wanted to knight him. So in 1897, she intended to do so at her Diamond Jubilee, but for whatever reason, she backed down. The family had convinced her that others would think that she was insane if she did this, and she feared the backlash from I guess folks in her family and maybe other citizens in the country. Not too long after, she ends up dying, and her son, Edward VII, when she dies, he takes over. He doesn't take very kindly to, and apparently I guess he never formed a connection with Abdul Karim, because Queen Victoria, his mother, dies within hours of her funeral. He had Abdul Karim, he has him deported. He orders that every record of their relationship be destroyed. He also forced Abdul to give up all the letters and any mementos that the Queen had ever given him. As I mentioned before, the royal family obviously was involved in the slave trade. They set up the Royal African Company of England. Edward Colston was a shareholder and employee, and he shipped more African slaves across the Atlantic than anyone else. Edward VIII became King of England after the death of his father, George the Fourth? Hold the phone, let me find out. Nope. He became King of England after the death of his father, George the Fourth. He ruled for less than a year, and he abdicated the throne in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson. Now, this was a controversy because she was an American divorcee. At the time, the Church of England, which was led by the monarch, did not allow divorces. They basically put it to King Edward. He had a choice to make. You either choose love or you choose the crown. He chose love, so then he became the Duke of Windsor. He got downgraded from king to Duke of Windsor. In October 1937, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor visited who? Who did they visit, you ask? They visit none other than Hitler. Yes, the Hitler. Whatever the salute was, Hitler. At Berchtesgaden, where Hitler had been vacationing since the 1920s. According to biographer Frances Donaldson, in her book, Edward VIII. My bad, it's been Edward VIII that we're talking about the whole time. My bad. Anyway, in her book, Edward VIII, the Duke gave Hitler full Nazi salutes during his visit. While some say his trip was more to receive support for Edward and his wife, the Duke's actions speak louder than hypotheses. The royal family did not support this visit, supposedly. However, just after the war, American diplomats uncovered 400 tons of German diplomatic papers at Marburg Castle, named the Marburg Files. And that's M-A-R-B-U-R-G for those of you who cannot understand me. Marburg Files, pretty damaging to the royal family. Why, you ask? Some 60 documents, which were letters, telegrams, and other papers, were written by people working around the Duke, including German agents during the war. Now, among these documents are details of the Nazi divide plan, Operation Willie, and it could have been Operation Billy, because I think they pronounce their W's as V's. The Germans' plan was really to gain control of Britain and overthrow the monarchy and return the Duke to his throne. The Germans viewed the Duke, who was perceived to be ambivalent about the war and as a better ally and successor than they thought the Duke would be better than King George VI, okay? In order to get the Duke on their side, the German agents tried to manipulate and ostracize the royal. They even attempted to convince the Duke that his brother King George had plans to assassinate him. The documents were leaked to the British government, and of course, the British government tried to suppress them. However, when World War II started, the Duke was made a major general in France, but Winston Churchill was aware of the Duke, his pro-Nazi sentiments, and sent him to be governor of the Bahamas. So pretty much he just kicks him to the curb. The Duke and Duchess didn't comply right away, but eventually they did end up in the Bahamas. Of course, the Nazis never succeeded at overthrowing the crown. In 1946, Britain, France, and the United States agreed to work together to process the Marburg Files, appointing top historians from each country to oversee the project, even though, the British government was trying to hide the truth. Americans released the documents in 1957. When Philip was just 8 months old, and when I say Philip, I mean the recently deceased Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband. That's who I'm referring to. Philip was just 18 months old. His family fled Greece in 1930 when he was 9 years old and away at CHEAM school in Britain. His mother had suffered a nervous breakdown, and all his sisters married within 6 months of each other. 2 of them married some high-ranking Nazi officials. And then his father ends up running off to Monaco with his mistress. Prince Philip was actually asked about this time, and I just want to note that after the monarchy had been overthrown, he said, quote, "Simply what happened. The family broke up. My mother was ill. My sisters were married. My father was in the south of France. I just had to get on with it, you know. You do, one does." End quote. Theodora, Prince Philip's sister, and because all this happened, I guess somebody had to take control of him and of the situation. She put him into a new school under the guidance of Kurt Hahn, H-A-H-N, an education specialist who had been her father-in-law's personal secretary. Hahn, who was Jewish, he left Germany after being arrested for protesting Nazis. Opens up a new school in Wardenstone, and I don't know how to say that, and let's just leave it at that. He opened a new school in Scotland, and this is where Prince Philip was basically tortured. 7 a.m. wake-ups, cold showers, barefoot runs, and other grueling tasks. And the school had a self-discipline regimen that shaped Prince Philip. Prince Philip was 16 years old, and he was still at the same crap hole of a school. His sister Cecile died in a plane crash. At a funeral in Germany, Prince Philip, marched next to men in Nazi uniforms during her funeral. Prince Philip has never confirmed family ties to the Nazi. None of his sisters were invited to his 1947 royal wedding to Queen Elizabeth. But if you look at photos, according to author Jonathan Petropoulos, you can see a serious family tie and family connection. He says, quote, "The photographs tell a different story." Then there was Prince Maximilian of, and I'm going to butcher this name as well, Liechtenstein. He was the second son of the reigning prince, and he married a New York fashion designer, Angela Brown, in 2000. He and her son, Prince Alfonso, are currently the highest ranking Black members of a reigning European dynasty. Bringing that up, that just shows, I guess, that, Meghan Markle isn't the first person of color in the royal family. I think to be unbiased here, we have to give both sides, both accounts, good or bad, as far as the family goes. What happened is, in 2017, Princess Michael of Kent, the wife of one of the Queen's cousins, wore a blackamoor brooch. And that's a jewelry piece that has to do with slavery. According to Harper's Bazaar, it, quote, fetishizes images of slavery, end quote. And she wore this to a Christmas lunch at Buckingham Palace, which Meghan attended. The princess later issued an apology. I don't really think it matters, because that same Princess Michael of Kent, told Black New Yorkers to, quote, go back to the colonies. And she has 2 black sheep, like an actual Baba black sheep kind of thing. She named her 2 black sheep on her farm Venus and Serena. I don't know what to do with that information. I just want to share it with you. If we look at the family historically, they've got some serious Nazi ties. The royal family has a pretty good tie to the slave trade. My Magic 8 Ball says outlook not so good. This being the royal family, history being so well documented on them, including the fact that they were into the slave trade and shareholders in it, even created a company for this slave trade. I think this is part of what made them so rich. If ever reparations were due, I think the royal family owes it to all the lineages and the commonwealth that they go and take trips and visit and all this, stuff to look good. I think they owe them a little more than just some visits. They owe them a lot more. that is not what this video is about. It is about the claims Meghan and Harry made, the validity behind them, given the family's history, especially with Queen Elizabeth's husband having so many Nazi ties. He has, and you can look this stuff up, he has used racial slurs many times over. Prince Andrew used the N-word in front of a group of people. Meghan was rightfully concerned about how she was being perceived and received by the family. There's no doubt in my mind that they didn't value her or her offspring in any capacity. I think they intentionally didn't care about the safety and well-being of her family, of her children. I think she probably cared more about Prince Harry, but I don't think she cared enough to provide security detail. Makes me feel like she wrote him off whenever he married Meghan. Her own husband, he's probably pretty dang racist. He probably wasn't very excited about the fact that Harry, Prince Harry, his grandson, was marrying someone of color. They might not have ever just out and out said it. I want to hear what you think. Do you think that this was just some big faux pas blown out of proportion? Maybe she took things the wrong way, like Lady Colin Campbell was saying? Everything was just misconstrued. There's no part of me that thinks that any of this was misconstrued. I wholeheartedly believe everything that Meghan and Harry were saying was beyond true. I think that they may even have tried to protect the royal family in some ways and maybe sugarcoat some of the things that they were said for fear of backlash. I almost feel like the royals are gonna have it out for her for exposing them and casting them in such a bad light. I mean, it's their own fault. I think that they're gonna seek a vengeance for her telling the biz, you know? Let me know down below, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that things are not the way that they seem. I hope that the royal family, they choose to educate themselves, really take steps to change things. That's my hope. Thank you guys so much for tuning into my channel, and I will see you guys later. Have a good one.